Hi there, and thanks for joining me today. This is the first video in a series of videos that I'm doing on spirituality and faith, and I recognise that this subject is very personal and not everyone's belief has the same approach, hence the different religious faiths. So, most of the content that I'll put on this channel can actually be adapted to suit your own personal views of religion, spirituality, or faith. But I do recognise that the concept of a divine plan doesn't suit all people, and that is fine by me. I respect people's rights to have different viewpoints, of course. Now, before I speak to the concept, I do request that people who don't believe in things like divine plan, please refrain from putting up your negative comments on the wall that might undermine other people's beliefs, because I will definitely be removing inappropriate or unkind comments, because my aim is to sustain hope for people and support for them to live a life of meaning and purpose, and any comments that might undermine this task will be removed. So before I speak the divine plan, however, I must outline the following disclaimer. So just a reminder that any comments I make here are based on my own understandings, experience, views, opinions or beliefs, and my views may change as I continue to grow and learn. You're encouraged and reminded to listen to your own inner voice, and none of my content is designed to replace professional medical, mental health, legal, financial or other advice. Also, any images you see here on Lorena's Labyrinth are my intellectual property, of which I hold the copyright, so please read the channel website terms of use. So for now, on with the video. So the divine plan is based upon a creationist theory that a creator god or goddess, or a team of gods, goddesses, lowercase g, are responsible for the creation of each soul. Part of the soul journey includes being born upon the earth multiple times for the purposes of human experience, in all its glory, including the hardships. Now, it relates to the sayings, as above, so below, where our soul is enduring even after the physical body has expired. At some point in time, the soul, or spirit, as we call it, is reborn into a new body, and this is the theory of reincarnation. Now, when the soul is embodied, it has various names to different people based on their beliefs, and I'll just throw some in here. There is the Namaste, the Soul Spark, Divine Spark, Eternal Flame, Holy Spirit, Christ Within, Christ Light, or the Flame of Light, and potentially others. So if you call it something else, please do let me know. I'd actually be quite interested. Pop a comment below. So then the other thing is, I'm just having a think about this, how best to describe this. The theory of the divine plan is underpinned by the belief that with each lifetime, most people are born with the veil over their eyes. This is a metaphor. It means that they are unable to see spirit and energy, but it also is a veil of remembrance, if you like, because we're required to forget what happens before we begin each new life. And part of our divine plan includes remembering that we are a couple of things, actually, but for all of us at least, that we are all divine and perfect manifestations of the God or Goddess. And this, whilst we're perfect, it doesn't mean that we won't or don't make mistakes or errors of judgment, or even that our lives are devoid of pain and suffering once we start to remember. It means that we know in our hearts that despite appearances, there is a divine order in our lives, and that each experience was carefully, if not meticulously, planned out before we return to Earth for this current lifetime. Now, throughout our lives, we're offered the opportunity to remember again and again as part of fulfilling our purpose on Earth. And this includes remembering that we're all interconnected, as we said before, as above, so below. Right? At the very least, the divine plans include notions of humanitarian concern and brotherly or sisterly love. And the pathway involves remembering who we individually are, that divine creation and manifestation, and the collective nature, which is we are all connected, and what we do, how we treat others, will reflect on other aspects. So, hurt one, hurt all, love one, love all kind of logic. But if we refer to the 10 Commandments of the Bible, I think the saying, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, applies, because what we do for one, we do to all of us. And then the other purpose is that each of us individually has a purpose to uplift humanity in some way, shape, or form. and each person has to recall their pathway. Now, just a couple of interesting tidbits here, that my understanding of soul creation is based on the universal laws of polarity and duality. That when the soul or the spirit, I'm going to call it a soul, I'm more comfortable with that, it is made, it's created as a twin, and that it has, well, you have the twin souls, two created together. One aspect is feminine and the other is masculine. And this feeds the idea, if you've heard the sayings of twin souls as romantic partners or twin flames. That's definitely a topic for a different video, because your divine partner is not necessarily your twin flame or a soulmate. They could be, they might be, but it would not be usual. And the other thing is that it doesn't matter if the soul is masculine or feminine. That doesn't dictate the human form that a spirit is going to take, because masculine spirits can be embodied as earthly females and vice versa as part of the entire experience, compounded experience, if you like. We're all required to live and experience different aspects of humanity. Anyway, I digress. The human experience is planned for each physical lifetime. Now, you might agree or you might disagree, and I'm really interested to hear your thoughts, so please do leave a comment below. So when we refer to the collective, and this is going to get a little bit deep here, once again the disclaimer comes into play. This is my understanding. But when we talk about the soul pack, we're talking about our soul family or group that is, for want of a better description, in heaven before we're born. Now, each group, and there's multiple soul packs, each pack has a specific purpose as well, a celestial purpose, if you like. And the individuals within the group also have a responsibility and a purpose while on earth to help the soul pack or the collective achieve their goals as well. So there again, we've got the saying, as above, so below. So as individuals, we are reborn. We come into the world as an individual aspect of the soul pack, and when we're born into an earthly family, we receive support and nurturing toward adulthood. And when we live as adults, we provide and support ourselves and potentially our friends and family to meet their earthly responsibilities. Now, as we become more aware and evolved about our responsibilities, we start to choose and take actions that are helpful to others, and this becomes a conscious decision. So ideally, we learn through this earthly experience to build upon compassion and love. So when we're in body, the focus of our early years tends to be quite egocentric, but as we evolve, we learn that when we self-care, we fill our cup emotionally, and we can live independently and become emotionally self-reliant. Once we understand and know how to replenish our own resources, then we're better able to assist others to learn skills of self-love and self-care for themselves. That old saying of fill the cup and the cup overflows. So on earth, we who care for the population are called humanitarians. From a divine plan perspective, we're all collectivists working towards the greater good of the soul pack. Now, incidentally, it's also my understanding that animals and insects have a divine plan, and they are also included in the planning. They also experience reincarnation, and each carnation they live at, from what I understand, is that they live at a higher vibration than the previous existence. So that sort of feeds the idea that of reincarnation that some people have, that you're born a rabbit and then in your next lifetime you might be a dog or a cow or whatever. That's that notion. So from the perspective of the individual soul, it's born and reborn to walk the earth. And this is why we often will hear people turn around and say, well, that's an old soul, because these little beings are born with that inner knowledge and wisdom, and they seem to be alert to what's going on around them. So all life, including soul life, is a series of infinite cycles that repeat or revolve, if you like. And the pattern of the cycles is best explained, from my perspective as well, with numerology and ruling numbers. A person with a ruling number of 1, for example, is at the beginning of a new cycle. That doesn't mean to say, I have seen somewhere where they say that if they've got a ruling number 1, that's their first time on the planet. I don't agree with that. It just, from where I sit, a number 1 is about a whole new cycle. And a person with a ruling 9 is at the final stage of a cycle of lifetimes, if you like. So the cycle number refers to the divine pathway as part of the plan and the process or guidance to achieving the planned learning or experience for the soul pack. I hope that's not confusing. Astrology also provides insight into the current pathway. Whether or not you believe in divine plans or not, I'll bet I would lay money on it that you have asked yourself more than once something along the lines of, what on earth did I do to deserve X or Y? Or, and I've said this long before I became consciously aware of my pathway, did I think I was 10 foot tall and bulletproof before I was born? Seriously, I bet you've asked yourself stuff like that too. So sometimes the divine plan is referred to as a divine roadmap, where all of us are headed to the same destination, being transformation and rebirth, but how we get to that goal is where the variations occur, both individually and collectively. As the saying goes, there's more than one road to China or more than one path to China. I can't remember what it is exactly. But we all have free will and we can choose the straight and flat path, or we can take the more adventurous one, the rocky terrain over the mountains. We've got free will. So while some of us may have agreed to do the rocky terrain, if you like, it can be very difficult. And while we're walking that pathway, we can actually request that we get some respite from this struggle and that we have a smoother path for a little while. We can always do that. There's also flexibility within the plan at certain times. Prime example of this is Source, Creator, God, all that I am, whatever name you want to call him, her, recognizes that when we're walking the earth plane, it can be so rife with challenges and can be very difficult. So we are assured that none of us come to the earth plane alone. As part of the planning, no soul, no spirit arrives without a team of support around them to assist them through these difficult phases to achieve our life purpose. Now, as previously stated, in the plan or the blueprint, there are a number of variables and there are some concrete things as well. And then there are options as well, which can be called free keys. Now, as I say, this is my understanding. If perhaps the grand design turned around and said, okay, we want this person to learn the lesson of independence by the time they're 30, and this person achieves that goal, say at age 21, then they have an option for new learning. So they can make a choice, and that's called a free key. That's my understanding of it. Another variable of freedom that we have is that we have choices and free will at all times. So while there are limitations on how much control we have over our environment and the people around us, we do have control over ourselves and how we react to the challenges that present to us, and we have free will around the decisions and choices that we make and our actions, and most importantly, how we treat others and our environment. So, free will doesn't make excuses for our bad behaviour or our bad choices or decisions. Just because our charts or our astro might say that we have a potential for a specific trait that's not attractive. So, for example, let's go over to the numerology and astrology charts. They will all outline positive and negative traits as part of the laws of polarity. If there's a positive trait, there's got to be a negative one. So if a person has negative traits such as being egotistical, fiery, abrasive, intolerant, emotionally manipulative, and so forth, dependent on their sun signs or their numerology, or even an addictive personality trait, which this can be identified in the charts as well, it doesn't mean that a person doesn't have free will, because they can make a choice about whether or not they're going to take that pathway. Now, sometimes we will auto-reflexively, based on our subconscious, do things, and it comes to our attention through other people who will call us out on our bad behaviour. So it's not appropriate to say things like, I can't help it, it's the way I am, you need to deal with it, right? These traits may be inherent to who you are, but you're not locked into this cycle or pattern of being that way. And not only that, the words that are expressed that I've just given you, they're not words of either love or compassion, and they certainly are not words of personal empowerment. None of us are victims of our spiritual existence or planning, and a refusal and resistance to change simply keeps us locked in unhealthy patterns, and it can in fact be counterproductive, because those kind of comments, of course, are going to repel people away from us. And when we're insensitive, actually, rather, when we're sensitive to the needs of others while remaining true to ourselves, we can actually rise above problems, we can navigate conflict, and we can build healthier relationships. Now, sometimes, of course, the relationships may end because of a clashing of values or morality or whatever. But the thing is, if a relationship ends, it can end in an amicable way, and where we learn from the experiences. And when we go into our new relationships or new friendships, we find people whose values are more aligned with ours. So when we're informed, it's easier to make the healthier choices for ourselves. So just to reiterate, free will also takes responsibility for our actions. We don't blame others for what we do and what we say, and we recognize that at the point of our trigger, if somebody has been responsible for triggering our behavior, that we do have control over how we respond. We might not feel that we do sometimes, but those are the opportunities to learn how to master our reactions. So we don't have to be unkind or even aggressive in our responses. At all times, we've got the free will over our choice and the capacity to make conscious decisions to, if I can speak, to step into our personal power. Now, what's more, if we are feeling that we're lacking in strength or powers of endurance because we pick the rocky terrain, we can at any time call upon our divine support team to assist us to navigate these difficulties. So, in regard to the divine plan and divine free will, all of that kind of stuff, I've decided that I'll actually give it with the context of my own life. So I want you to forget any ideas that you might have, and hopefully you don't have them, that people that work with energy or spiritual teachers, healers, or psychics, that they might have a life full of sunshine and roses that doesn't have any challenges, because seriously, that doesn't happen. All of us, and that includes us, interact with others on our life path, and we have family relationships, friendships, and so forth, and even working relationships. Now, more recently in my own life, I received another major disappointment, shall we say, within relationships, and I was deeply frustrated and feeling very sad, for want of a better word. So I decided to go and review my own numerology chart, and I created this for myself a number of years ago. And it turns out I haven't actually really looked at it since about 2019. Once I looked at it, I was able to sit there and do that deep sigh and like, oh God, okay. All right, this was meant to be, because clearly I can now see that this disappointment fits in with my plan, because it's fitting in with the if I can say the word, the trajectory of my current life. All right. So anyway, there's another thing I'm going to put a disclaimer in on here, because I've heard of people. This is with a variation. I have heard of people that call themselves spiritual or enlightened, telling people that have experienced horrendous trauma at inappropriate times that they chose that experience on a soul level before they were born. Now, that might be true and it might not be. I'm not going to sit in judgment of this, but I'm just going to say that I believe it is completely inappropriate to tell somebody who has just survived, for example, or left a violent relationship, or who has experienced rape, or who has a family member that was murdered, or who, yeah, just anything awful like that, to turn around and tell them this stuff, because on a conscious level, they may have no idea about this and they may not be spiritual at all, and that just re-traumatizes them. And I've got to say, it's got a stench of victim blaming about it as well, which I don't like. Now, as far as is it true or not, I don't believe I'm in the position to say this about other people's paths. I can speculate and say, well, I have noticed things when I do my numerology reports, that there are indicators of people that have got violent behaviours, or indicators of people that might be exposed to domestic violence as part of their life path. But as far as saying that a person agreed to this, I really, really don't know. What I will say is what I believe to be true, which is that if somebody has been victimised, say if there's a murder in the family, that there is karma for murderers. So I just don't understand or see myself how that can be part of a pre-planning. And this might be a great discussion for us when we do our lives, where we can talk about this, because I understand that for people that do atrocities, shall we say, that they have to live out the karma consequences over the next lives that they live. So, yeah, I'm really not sure about that. But anyway, back to the divine plan and the flexibility of it and my own experiences. I have managed to work through a lot of my own life, and I do believe the only people that can really establish what is the life path is yourself. We can show pointers, but it's up to the individual to find out their own path and purpose. But anyway, what I worked at upon my own reflections was that I was meant to have 2 children as part of my divine plan, and I had an option to have another 2 children. So interestingly, I had 2 daughters and then I had a son, and this was way before, I've got to put this into context, this was way before I was consciously aware of concepts such as the divine plan. So it was all based on my intuition and gut instinct at the time. I believed that I had a 4th child, another son that was allocated for me to give birth to. And while I was pregnant, so I'm being giving a bit of disclosures here. While I was pregnant with my 3rd child, my son, my ex-husband assaulted me. Now, while I did end up leaving him, we did have what is referred to as the on-again, off-again relationship before you actually go your separate ways permanently. So my concerns were that even though I felt that I should be having a 4th child, that I wouldn't be able to cope with the 4th child, even if I repartnered down the track, that 3 children was more than enough for me to take care of. So I decided to have a tubal ligation. Now, where this gets interesting, I feel, is as I sat outside before my surgery, I was in the garden and I felt the presence of spirit and I started to cry because I felt that the presence that I was feeling was my unborn baby, and I felt that it was a son. And I have conscious recollection to this day of apologizing to this spirit and telling it that I was sorry that I wasn't strong enough to have it in this lifetime. And I did, in fact, carry guilt for not having this child for many years before I was able to find my internal peace. So, what we can conclude from this was that I was aware that I was predestined to have 2 children with the option of 4 at my discretion, free will. So, then moving on a few years later, quite a few actually, my daughter was pregnant with my first grandchild. Now, as grandparents, if you're there or been there, we all feel very connected and a warm fuzzy toward our little grandbabies. And I was unable to meet my little grandson until he was 6 years old. So I went to the airport and I was watching my daughter come toward me with the baby in her arms. I'm going to refer back to the old, he was 6 weeks old, and his little 6-week-old neck and his face was turning towards me from a distance. He was basically rubbernecking at me. His little hands and feet were going like everything, his little arms and legs kicking. And he was so alert. He was staring right at me. And as she got close to me, perhaps about 1.5 meters, I was holding my hands out saying, "Oh my God, you'll drop him." He was just wriggling so much. And she was struggling with the hand luggage. And I swear to God that little fella, he launched from her arms and into mine. My legs turned to jelly. We were staring into each other's eyes. I had to sit down in a chair and it was like the world stood still, literally. Now, I was thinking I must have been insane, as you do, and was I the only person noticing this? But one of the other passengers, at least, who had seen what was happening, walked past and said, "Oh my God, that baby knows you." Now, while I couldn't speak at the time, what I do know is that while that little love was with me, he might have only been 6 weeks old, but I got his first smile, his first real, genuine, beaming smile, and it was like he was besotted and in love with me. Now, our connection was a pure and unadulterated soul connection, and I loved him right back, of course. And I have not consciously explored the idea that this might be the same soul that was my option to be born, and ended up being born by my daughter. My daughter's a little sensitive, so she might interpret that as me claiming ownership of her biological son. I will, however, say that there is a very strong soul connection between myself and this child, and even now I don't get to see him much, but once that soul connection is in, it's in. Now, the other point I make is that usually over the passage of life, the reasons for suffering become clear, and the reasons are usually associated with the big picture of humanity and not necessarily individual ones. So back in about 2000, I read a book that offered me inspiration, and it was called Creating Happiness Intentionally. Now, if I recall correctly, the book was authored by a man who had lost two daughters in a few short years as young adults. Both were murdered, and both the girls' murderers were found and sent to jail. Now, the author was able to speak in his story about how he managed to survive this pain and suffering, and how he was able to meet and forgive the murderers. In my own situation, it was not nearly as dramatic as his. However, I did live through, and I continue to live through, some rather extreme challenges. And I often used to ask the universe why this was, and I felt that it was not fair, that I was living as a consequence to poor choices made when I was young and silly. However, some years ago now, a few years ago, probably about 5, I was invited to sit on a steering committee as part of creating a systemic change for a vulnerable demographic. Now, I'm being very discreet here, obviously. I was offered the role as a consultant based on my lived experience in the field, and also because I'm a qualified social worker. So I would not have been offered that role if it was not for personal experience. I do recall once I received my invitation and had accepted it, that I called my daughter and I said something like, you know what? If this is what all the pain was about, then if I can make a change to the system, then I'm happy and it's all worthwhile. So, just a reminder that Creator recognises that the journey can be very hard at times. The saying that no man or woman as it happens, or however a person identifies in the modern world, is designed to be an island or a sole operator is appropriate. To support each one of us on our journey, we're all allocated a guardian from the beginning of time. And this concept will be covered in a video on guardian angels. Now, suffice to say, guardians extend unconditional, divine, and limitless love and support to us. We can also access the support of our guides, who are considered to be enlightened souls. They've previously walked the life path with the experiences that we've agreed to for this current time frame, if you like, or life path right now. And so they will try and guide us, and we have to be awake to following their guidance. Anyway, the guides have a specific role. They're generally part of our soul pack or our family pack. So we are never ever alone on this path. Even if we feel that we're alone, even if we've got nobody around us physically, we always have the support and unconditional love of our guides and guardians. So, our primary function as a person walking the planet is to reconnect with the truth of our soul and to consciously connect with the divine love that lives both within us and around us. And in this way, we can live with peace, joy, love, harmony, regardless of the environment that we find ourselves in. And through this connection, we are able to develop our gifts and talents as part of our achieving our individual and specific purposes that we agreed to in the divine plan before we were born. Now, when we can do this, we will also have the opportunity to reconnect. Well, actually, we will have opportunity to reconnect with our soul pack, who are currently walking the earth plane at different times across the life path. And you will have heard, for those that are still trying to reconnect, no doubt you've heard people say, whether they believe in the plan or not, I just haven't found my tribe yet. Or they may reference my soul family and a soul connection, and that kind of thing, but they might not actually even really understand what it is they're referring to. But either way, interestingly, a soul connection is one that carries a recognition, usually between both parties. And when we find our soul pack members, it can actually make life and our physical existence just so much more pleasurable. Even if they're only in our life for a short or brief period of time, it seems to enhance the quality of our life. So basically, the divine plan is informed by love. Love underpins it in its entirety. There is the love and compassion of self, combined with the love and compassion and care for others, and also the love, care, compassion of the divine. Now, divine love, when we manifest it ourselves, also includes the capacity to forgive. And forgiveness can be a big topic, so I will do that as a separate video. So, just a little something for consideration for you to reflect upon. It's something that was put to me. I have no fixed opinion on it, but it tends to make sense to me in many ways. But what was put to me some years ago was that often the relationships that appear to be the most testing for us are the ones that have been identified to be the part of the divine plan and designed to support the soul family pack to achieve whatever the family pack goals are, and as part of our personal growth and development. What this can look like is the person, for example, and I use examples, who has a particularly dysfunctional family. Perhaps they're estranged from their parents, perhaps they've got a toxic sibling or whatever that drives them out of the family unit. The point that was made to me was that these people that play the harshest roles for teaching the most painful lessons are actually very much part of the divine plan. And these are people that we're connected to as part of our family pack, even though it doesn't feel like it at times. But they are playing out their roles perfectly to teach us whatever it is that we need to learn from them. And quite often, when we do the astro and the numerology reports, we can see that that person is actually helping the individual to develop their independence or whatever, which is quite fascinating. Once again, I say I'm not firmly convinced one way or another. I'm interested in hearing your views. Please feel free to leave comments. Now, the other thing too that I wanted to point out before I close off is I apologise for some of the inadequacies with my technology. This is a real challenge for me. I'm learning how to do it. I'm learning how to do the voiceovers, and I thank you for bearing with me. I did consider doing the artificial intelligence, but where they do the mechanical voiceovers, because I thought that would at least streamline it. But as far as I'm concerned, we lose that human element, and I think it's probably better for me to do these things showing my flaws, if you like. So for right now, gratitude for blessings, blessings, seen and unseen. And thank you again. Have a wonderful day. And it's a pleasure being here with you. Thank you. Bye bye.